Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something really specific, a gardening puzzle, you could say. It's about Mexican mint and why the stems might be turning brown. But really, it opens up this bigger idea about, resilience and managing change. So the mission today is to dig into these notes from a gardener. They've been propagating Mexican mint cuttings, and they said it was largely successful, which sounds great, but there's always a but, right? They notice these brownish, kind of woody stems developing. And apparently, it's more obvious on the thicker cutting. So we need to figure out what's causing this, look at the four main ideas the gardener had, and pinpoint, like, the real mistake behind it all.
Yeah, and it's a great example, actually. It shows how you can succeed at starting something, getting the cuttings to root, but then run into trouble keeping it healthy long term. It's like launching a new project perfectly, but then hitting these weird glitches later on. We're trying to understand why these seemingly strong, thick cuttings developed this specific weakness and how that weakness looks like it. Well, is it just getting older or is it actually sick? That's the confusion.
Okay, let's dive into that. The observation first. Brownish, woody stems, especially on the thicker cuttings. That detail, the thickness, seems important. Does that immediately suggest something?
It does. It points you in a couple of directions right away. Either it's about structure and maturity because thicker stems are older or working harder, or maybe they're more vulnerable somehow, perhaps needing more resources.
Right. So when a gardener sees that browning, they have to sort of quickly think through the options. What were the main ones considered here? Let's unpack those four potential culprits.
Okay, so the first two are generally the less worrying ones. They're more about normal plant changes.
So number one is just the plant getting older, natural aging. Lignification, is that the term?
Exactly, lignification. Lignin is the stuff that makes stems woody. Mint is usually soft, herbaceous. But older plants or stressed plants, they naturally start to harden up near the base. It's for support. So if these thicker cuttings have been around a bit longer, maybe growing for a while, that woodiness could just be normal. It would feel firm, maybe a bit brittle, light brown or grayish usually, and solid inside.
Okay, makes sense. Just growing up. And that ties into the second idea the gardener had, being root bound. How does the pot situation affect the stem above ground?
Well, being root bound is a major stress. The plant literally runs out of space, roots get tangled, can't get enough water or nutrients easily, so the plant kind of shifts into survival mode. It might harden its lower stem to support the limited growth it can manage. It's signaling stress and maturity at the same time. If you checked the pot and saw that tight ball of roots, then yeah, that woody stem could definitely be a consequence of that.
So aging and root binding both lead to a kind of structural hardening, a firm woodiness.
Right. But then the other two possibilities shift gears. We move from structure to potential problems, pathology.
Okay, number three was nutrient deficiency, specifically a lack of potassium. Why potassium?
Potassium, or K plus A, is really important. It helps manage water, activates enzymes, keeps cells healthy. It's mobile in the plant. So if there's a shortage, the plant will pull potassium from older parts, like maybe these thicker established stems, to send it to new growth. This basically starves the older cells, they weaken, break down, and that can cause browning or yellowing. But crucially, you usually see potassium deficiency in the leaves first. Yellowing edges, maybe necrosis. A brown stem from this alone is maybe less common. And it often looks patchy, not uniformly woody.
Okay, so the pattern matters. Leaves first, usually. Which brings us to the last and maybe most worrying one. Stem rot, a fungal or bacterial thing.
Exactly. And this is where the texture is key. If the stem is firm, you're thinking aging, root-bound, maybe deficiency. But if that brown area is soft, mushy, maybe looks water-soaked, especially down near the soil, that's almost certainly rot. It's active decay. The tissue is dying because of an infection. It's often darker brown, maybe even blackish, and it can spread fast.
So the feel of the stem is the big diagnostic clue here. Firm versus soft.
Absolutely. Is it hardening or is it collapsing? That tells you if you need a bigger pot, some fertilizer, or if you've got a disease on your hands.
It's quite a logical process.
Yeah.
But the notes say the gardener kind of zeroed in on one cause pretty quickly. They seem to lean towards stem rot.
They did, yeah.
But wait, didn't they sort of skip checking the roots or the soil nutrients? They went straight to rot based on a memory.
Mm.
Isn't that a bit like, confirmation bias?
Yeah.
Jumping to a conclusion?
That's a really fair point. And in a perfect world, you test everything, right? Check the roots, test the soil. But sometimes, especially with plants you know well in your own garden, pattern recognition is incredibly powerful. It's about knowing that specific plant's history in that environment.
Okay. So what was the pattern?
Well, they felt the stems. looked closely, and decided the symptoms were more like that early stage mushiness, that pathological browning, not just uniform hardening. So yes, they concluded stem rot seemed the most likely culprit.
Right. And the reason they feel confident about that
Mhm.
diagnosis, this is the interesting part, it came from a past experience.
Exactly.
No,
This is the key. They remembered something specific. They'd seen this exact kind of stem rot before. It happened when they moved a mature Mexican mint plant
that's crucial.
too quickly into full sun.
Ah, so it wasn't just, oh, I saw rot once. It was, I saw rot under these specific conditions involving sun exposure.
Precisely. The previous event linked the symptom rot directly to an environmental trigger, sudden, intense sunlight. It suggested the sun didn't cause the fungus directly, but the stress from the sudden change in light that weakened the plant and let the rot take hold.
So the rot is like the secondary infection. The real problem was the shock from the move, like stressing your immune system and then catching a cold. The cold is the symptom, but the stress opened the door.
Couldn't have put it better myself. The environmental shock compromised the plant's natural defenses, and then opportunistic fungi or bacteria already present in the soil just seized the moment, and they hit the thicker stems, maybe because they hold more moisture or resources, making them a prime target once the defenses were down.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense why they'd focus on rot, connecting it back to that sun shock memory.
Mm.
So this leads directly to the core mistake identified in the notes.
Yeah.
The stem rot, they concluded, was basically caused by a lack of acclimatization. Simple as that. The notes are really clear. The plant was moved abruptly, straight from shade into full sun. Bam. And the crucial step missed was that gradual transition period. The notes specifically mentioned skipping the recommended week or two to let the plant adjust slowly.
And that week or two is not just a suggestion, it's biological and necessary.
Yeah.
We need to understand what sun shock actually does to a plant internally. Think about a plant grown in shade. Its leaves are optimized for low light. Suddenly, it's blasted with intense UV radiation and heat. The plant basically panics. It has to frantically try to produce more chlorophyll, more protective pigments, and desperately try to cool itself by transpiring huge amounts of water.
So all its energy goes into just surviving the light.
Pretty much. Imagine its energy budget. If suddenly 90% of its resources are diverted to emergency light handling and cooling, what gets cut? Things like defense mechanisms, producing antifungal compounds, repairing tiny cell damages, those get put on hold.
Ah, I see. So the shock itself doesn't create the rot, but it effectively switches off the plant's immune system.
Exactly. The defenses drop. Add a little cell damage from the heat and light intensity, and you've created the perfect welcome mat for any pathogen lurking in the soil. And again, those thicker stems, maybe a bit more water content, more stored energy, prime real estate for rot once the door is open.
This really highlights the lesson learned then. The gardener's big takeaway seems to be always, always gradually acclimatize, especially when moving plants like Mexican mint or really anything sensitive into more intense conditions like open ground.
It's absolutely fundamental. That transition period, that week or two, it's not optional padding. It's the time the plant physically needs to rebuild. To thicken its outer layer, its cuticle, to adjust how it manages water, to ramp its defenses back up after the initial stress. Skipping that, you're basically guaranteeing stress. You're building a future problem into the system, even if the plant looks okay for a few days or weeks.
So it shifts the focus from just treating the symptom, like spraying for rot.
Right, to preventing the conditions that allowed the rot in the first place. It's proactive system management, not just reactive troubleshooting.
Okay, let's recap. We started with a brown stem on Mexican mint cuttings. 4 possibilities. Natural aging, being root-bound, maybe a potassium issue, or stem rot. By looking at the gardener's past experience and the specific signs, stem rot emerged as a likely culprit. But the root cause of the rot wasn't the fungus itself, but the stress from moving the plant too quickly from shade to sun. No acclimatization.
The key was skipping that gradual week or two transition.
The big lesson.
Yeah.
Respect the transition time.
Exactly. And, it really makes you think beyond gardening. If a tough plant like Mexican mint can get seriously sick, develop actual rot just from skipping a 1 or 2 week adjustment period to sunlight, well, where else are we doing that? In our work, our lives, are we pushing new initiatives or ourselves into full sun instantly without that crucial week or two to adapt? Maybe the immediate result isn't catastrophic failure, but perhaps it's like that stem rot, a hidden weakness, a vulnerability that lets other problems creep in later. That's kind of the universal cost of skipping acclimatization, the real price of sun shock.